Sifu is a game that is absolutely worth your time, but even more importantly, it's worth your patience. Let me tell you why. This is a game that is as undeniably refreshing in its originality as it is unrelenting in its difficulty. Now, quick disclaimer, about 2 hours after I finished making this video, a story broke about difficulty levels being added into the game, as well as a bunch of other accessibility features through post-launch updates. So consider this a review of the standard difficulty, but no, if this game seems a bit too hard, then there's going to be an easier option. Okay, now onto the original video. Oh god, it immediately doesn't hold up. Here we go. Many of today's games are designed and developed in a way to make them welcoming to players of all skill levels. What used to be no difficulty options evolved into an easy, normal, and hard option. Nowadays, games like Shadow of the Tomb Raider even give you individual difficulty settings for puzzles and exploration, as well as combat. For the most part, games are more accessible now than they've ever been, even if Wolfenstein 2 does make you feel like absolute trash for needing to play on easy. But then in 2009, a developer released a game and basically Y2K'd us all back to the arcade by making a title that was insultingly difficult, frustrating, and ultimately incredibly rewarding. I'm not here to point fingers, so for privacy's sake, let's call the developer From S.
No, that's too obvious.
So what made F Software's games so successful? It's not because they created difficult games, it's because they created difficult worlds. Worlds where mastery is not a right, but it's a privilege and a necessity. Sifu, in the same way, crafts a revenge story that strikes that same balance between difficulty and mastery in a way that really makes you feel like you're a 70-year-old man that knows how to give one heck of a paddling.
Talking out of turn, that's a paddling. Looking out the window, that's a paddling. Staring at my handles, that's a paddling. Paddling the school canoe, oh, you better believe that's a paddling.
Now, the difficulty of this game is going to be talked about by a lot of people, and people once again are going to ask the question, but is this game too hard? After finishing it, I think we're all asking the wrong question. Sifu is challenging and needs a level of skill, sure, but that's the same to be said of almost any other game. The difficulty, in my opinion, doesn't come from Sifu itself, but the games that led up to it. Look at the Arkham games as an example. They make you feel like you're Batman, and when you're leaping from goon to goon, you feel awesome and unstoppable. Don't look away from the TV though, because if you glance down at the controller, suddenly you'll feel a lot less awesome. Most games are concerned about making you feel like you're the best, rather than trying to actually make you the best. Sifu definitely doesn't hold your hand in this way, meaning that every
dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge
is a manual input done by the player. This is something that Sekiro nailed, and if you're a fan of the aggressive, parry-heavy combat from that, you'll find a lot to like here. Pulling off a series of dodges and parries feels great, and with that, you start to see the real appeal of the game. While it can be frustrating at times, and the tight camera can sometimes lead to some unfair deaths, the frustration came from knowing I could do better, and recognizing exactly what I did wrong. The game puts you in the same situations over and over again, not to try and defeat you, but to try and teach you how to master it. And if you pay attention to the lessons that it gives, it won't be long before you too will be saying,
I know Kung Fu.
You can choose to play as a male or female character before setting out with the names of 5 targets you're hunting, but outside of an initial location for each of them, you really don't know anything. Each target resides in one of the game's 5 levels, and while it is apparently possible to be able to finish the game on your first go, I wouldn't count on it. Chances are you're going to be dying a lot. Fortunately for you though, death doesn't end a playthrough straight away thanks to a magic talisman in your possession. Instead, your rage increases and you get straight back into the fight. Who would have thought that the main mechanic for the game would have come straight from the mouth of a creepy Matthew McConaughey?
I get older, they stay the same age.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do.
But it did. So here we are, and here's how it works. Each time you die, your death counter increases by 1, and you age that many years. By defeating enemies, you can lower your death counter over time, but if you die repeatedly, that number can stack up, and you can be finding yourself aging pretty rapidly. Once you hit 70 though, your talisman breaks, and another death means you'll be having to start the level again. This mechanic of being able to extend your runs but at a cost is great, and I love that you can actually see how your character continues to age each time they come back into the fight. And because I'm hilarious, each time I went down and came back up, I would always say,
Alright, let's do this one last time.
which, yeah, not everyone here was a huge fan of. As you hit each new decade, your age and experience makes you more damaging in fights, but it also means it reflects the frailty of your increasing age, meaning you can't take as many hits. Every time I'd get into my 60s, I always knew that continuing with the run meant accepting the risk that there was less room for error, but it also meant that I'd accept the reward of being able to be much more damaging if I could just handle that pressure. Heck, sometimes it was just worth continuing to be able to see a 60-year-old man spring back to life to the shock of everyone in the room.
The price is wrong, bitch.
When your run does eventually come to an end though, you don't have to start at the very beginning of the game. Sifu will record your best age at the start of each level, so you can just retry from any of those points. However, if your best age going into that level is 65, it doesn't give you a lot of room to work with. Your other option is to replay the previous stage and carry as much of your youth as possible into the next level to set yourself up with some more breathing room for future runs. Everything about Sifu feels like a roguelike, even though it's not really a roguelike. It does a good job in some areas of giving you a sense of permanent progression, particularly in the level design. Each level has a shortcut that can be unlocked once you reach the boss for the first time. While this saves time in future runs, it also means you skip over the shrines and experience needed to get new skills or perks for that run. Especially in my first few attempts, shortcuts actually left me pretty underprepared and just shortened the time to me getting my ass kicked by the boss.
Shortcut! Shortcut!
The thing that's very un-roguelike though, is the fact that these levels are all painstakingly handcrafted instead of being procedurally generated. All the environments are unique and beautiful in their own ways. The third level in particular is an absolute standout. But this means that each of your runs is exactly the same. You know the exact path to take, what enemies you'll encounter on the way, and what weapons you'll have at your disposal. It means Sifu's not just about getting good, but it encourages planning, practice, and memorization, similar to a Hitman title. The more I replayed these levels, the more I realized that I wasn't as much a skilled Kung Fu master as I was just being Robert Downey Jr. from Sherlock Holmes.
First, distract target. Then block his blind jab. Counter with cross to left cheek. Discombobulate. Dazed, will attempt wild haymaker. Employ elbow block. And body shot. Block furrow left. Weaken right jaw. Now fracture. Break cracked ribs. Traumatize solar plexus. Dislocate jaw entirely.
While the game is highly dependent on skill, I would say expect 10 hours or so for a first full playthrough, and then maybe another 3 to 4 hours to be able to get the good ending. It doesn't take too long before you've done everything you can do in the game, and unlike other roguelikes, you're not given much reason to go back to it unless you want to try and complete a no-death playthrough or some other goal that you've set for yourself. That's not a bad thing though. It's better to be left wanting more than overstaying a welcome. At its core, Sifu is about the journey of becoming a Kung Fu master and learning the lesson that with time comes experience, as long as you're willing to pick yourself back up every time you get knocked down. This is the same journey that you go on as the player, as you persevere through each defeat and prepare to go again. While at times it does feel like Sifu needed to incorporate either more or less roguelike elements than the final product did, this is a game that is all about that journey rather than the end destination. Then you add in the fantastic combat, some of the slickest animation work I've seen in a long time, and one of the coolest secret endings that I almost entirely missed, and it makes this a game definitely worthy of your time. If you've made it to the end of the video, consider giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. And while you're here, why not check out this other video I've made? YouTube reckons it's going to be perfect for you. Yeah, I know, for you. Technology is wild.